Maybe one day I'll do a YouTube video about it. Our next presenter is Mason Boyd. He is a senior economics and philosophy double major with a political science minor from Honeacre, Virginia. Mason is the son of Doug and Melanie Boyd. Hey. And in the fall, he will be the first in his immediate family to attend graduate school when he arrives to the University of Tennessee to pursue a PhD in political science. Throughout his time at Emory and Henry College, Mason has made the most of his opportunities given to him. He has traveled to the University of Exeter, worked in the office of United States Senator Tim Kaine, and this year produced an economic impact analysis for People Incorporated of Abingdon. Mason's time at Emory and Henry College has sculpted him to become the individual that he is today and has prepared him for what lies beyond graduation on May 11th. Praise the Lord. All of this being said, Mason is thankful for the opportunities that he has had at Emory and Henry College and sees them as crucial to his current and future success. Please help me in welcoming Mason Boyd to the stage.
So hello everybody, I want to thank you all for being here. I know I appreciate it as well as everyone else that's presenting today, so we really do appreciate that. So today I'm excited to talk to you about my senior economics project, which was an economic impact study for People Incorporated in Abingdon. So a little bit about how this project got started. It really began with Norma Honeacre of People Incorporated reaching out to numerous institutions in the region, and specifically their economics departments, about the possibility of conducting an economic impact analysis for People Incorporated's operations in both southwestern Virginia and eastern Virginia. And so she came into contact with Dr. Deborah Spencer. By the way, Emory and Henry was the only institution to get back with her about the possibility of doing an economic impact study. And so she got into contact with Dr. Spencer, and they discussed the possibility of having a student lead this project to produce an economic impact analysis for People Incorporated. So Dr. Spencer asked me. A little bit about why I decided to take on this project as my senior project is that I've grown up in this area and I've had family work for People Incorporated. I know about the policies and the services that they offer to the most vulnerable within my community. Things like tax assistance, child care, housing assistance, again, all of which help the most vulnerable in my home and my community. And having been at Emory and Henry for 4 years now, I've definitely learned about the value of giving back to your community. And so I thought this was an excellent way to do that. So to begin, what exactly is economic impact modeling? So roughly, it shows how an event affects the economy of a defined region. But what does that mean, like in real English? So let's say, for example, Washington County were to attract a car factory. We all know that we've seen in the headlines like 300 jobs created, when there's a new factory go up. But what we don't take into account are all of the jobs created and money spent to build the factory, all the jobs created and money spent in order to gather the raw materials for the factory, as well as the McDonald's that goes up next to it in order to feed the workers, or the Gap or the Old Navy that goes up to clothe themselves and their families. And so economic impact modeling allows us to have a much fuller image of that, and it allows us to see all the linkages throughout the economy that comes from a specific event, like the building of a car factory. So, why is this even important? Well, specifically for nonprofits, the first reason would be service. So nonprofits offer services, again, to the most vulnerable people within our region. Specifically, local nonprofits do this because these are the people that are in our backyards. And over the last 30 years or so, there's been a large transition in the role of nonprofits and with the services they provide and how they're rolled out. And this is because of funding. So in the last 30 years, the federal government has changed from providing a lot of these services to instead subcontracting them to local nonprofits. So for local nonprofits, obtaining government funding through block grants is extremely important and able to provide the services that I just mentioned. And And so in order to make a better case for this funding, it's important to show impact, right? So we want to see that spending actually has a positive impact in the community that nonprofits are trying to affect, which leads to the last reason being effectiveness. So say a nonprofit, or any company for that matter, had a program that for every dollar they spent, they get a dollar back out. We would all know that's not very effective because there's no new growth, right? So there's not a great positive impact there. And so by doing an economic impact analysis, we're able to see that. So then the methods that I used. I used input-output modeling through the software called Implant, which Emory and Henry College was able to get for me, which really made this a whole lot smoother. But essentially what input-output modeling is it's a method that shows us the linkages in an economy. So going back to our car factory example, it shows us not only how the economic sector of car manufacturing is impacted, but it tells us how steel production, aluminum production, rubber, glass, anything that would go into a car, it shows us how that's impacted from that event. So it allows us to have a much fuller image of the impact that it has. Then next, I looked at 4 regions, 2 of which I'm going to talk about today. The first, Southwest Virginia, which I consider anything Roanoke West. The main service area, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Eastern Virginia, and the Commonwealth of Virginia as a whole. So before we get to the results, I want to talk a little bit about the money multiplier. So imagine that you spent $1 and it generates $1.50 in impact. You take that $1.50, divide it by the dollar, and you're going to get 1.5. And this is going to serve as your multiplier to show the actual impact that spending the dollar created. And we're able to do this in the same way for the impact study that I produced for People Incorporated. And I'll talk about the importance of the money multiplier when we get to the results. Yep. So the main service area included the counties of Buchanan, Dickinson, Russell, and Washington, as well as the cities of Bristol, Tennessee, and Virginia. Of course, I included Bristol, Tennessee because it lies right on the state line. As we can see, I have an initial input of $7.8 million from People Incorporated and an output of $10.5 million, which produces a multiplier of 1.34. And so going back to the importance of the money multiplier, say People Incorporated wanted to open a new office in Glade Springs. And this office cost $400,000 to build, and they wanted an immediate impact. Maybe to try to justify some sort of funding, or just to know. They could take $400,000, multiply it by 1.34, and have an immediate impact analysis on that expenditure. And so it's a really important tool for any nonprofit or business to have in their tool belt. And lastly, the $7.8 million worth of input makes up 54% of all nonprofit-related activity within the region defined above. So Buchanan, Russell, Dickinson, Washington, and Bristol. So this really speaks to the magnitude of the operations that they have within this region. So next, we have the Commonwealth of Virginia as a whole. And basically, I just combined Southwest Virginia and Eastern Virginia. And I had an initial input of $10.1 million and an output of $13.8 million, which again produced a multiplier of 1.34, which I was glad to see is relatively consistent across the state. And in the same way that the multiplier could be used in the main service area, it can be used at the state level, again, in the same way. So if the office were to be in, Salem, for example, they could use whatever that office was going to cost, multiply it by 1.34, and you have an immediate impact. And then furthermore, 3 months of hard work culminated in the picture you see here, which was included in People Incorporated's annual report for this year, showing a brief summary of the impact analysis that I had for the entire state. So before I, leave, I'm going to talk about what we can't show, and that's the human impact. So going back to what nonprofits do, they offer services to the most vulnerable within our communities, right? Whether that be healthcare services, housing services, tax services, child care, all of that. And there's no way for us to measure how, giving someone child care or access to child care, access to healthcare, what type of opportunities that opens for them, both in their personal lives as well as, professionally or in economics. So I've included here a picture of the RAM Clinic. And if you don't know what the RAM Clinic is, it's essentially a mobile healthcare clinic that travels all around the country. This one takes place in Wise County. They offer access to primary care, dental, and vision for people who may not have access to that care regularly. And so it's really important to remember that numbers and economic impact are extremely important, right? We're able to use those to justify funding for nonprofits that offer services like this for the most vulnerable within our communities. But we need to remember that the economy is about more than just numbers. It's also about people. And organizations like People Incorporated are able to provide services for the most vulnerable within our community by showing their impact, justifying their funding, and offering services to the most vulnerable in our neighborhoods. Thank you.